Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. My name's Jane Bayler. It's great to have you here. And I have a wonderful guest for you today, Michael Levin. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Jane. Nice to be here.
It's so great to have you here, Michael. And the topic that we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite topics, which is writing books. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it. But before we do, I'm just going to introduce you. So Michael is a New York Times best-selling author and ghostwriter who's written, edited, and published over 1,000 books across 35 years. And they call him the Michael Jordan of ghostwriting. So today we're going to look at the power of books to build your authority, credibility, and business, of course, and why you might want to hire a ghostwriter like Michael to take you straight to the top. So I really can't wait to get into it. So, Michael, you're based in New York, aren't you, first of all?
Yes.
So, okay. So New York is a very fiercely competitive place when it comes to business, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That's absolutely true. Just like London, I would think.
Just like London, exactly. And so how does a book help you succeed as an entrepreneur?
Well, sure. It doesn't really matter where your business is based. Because of the internet, buyers have more choices than ever, which tends to commoditize sellers, entrepreneurs, business owners. So the question becomes, how do you escape the commodity trap, especially when everybody's websites tend to look exactly alike and everybody's white papers and leave behinds tend to look alike. And in my experience, nothing creates more credibility, authority, believability than a book of your own. So that's the magic of books. It gets you out of the commodity trap so that you can charge the higher fees that you're entitled to because of your lengthy experience and your hard work and your preeminence. It's a way of distributing. It's a way of demonstrating to the world just how special you are.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, nobody's got time to read books today." What's your response to that?
Well, if your book addresses a specific important problem that a member of your niche audience or your tribe has, they will make the time to read that book. And even if they don't read it, the fact that you wrote it makes you something like a priest in a medieval village. You're the only literate one. The fact that they see your book on your website available as a free PDF download, or the fact that you've handed it to them in a meeting, or they received a copy when you spoke, this puts you in a different league from anyone else, even if all they do is hold it, look at the front cover, look at the back cover, look at all the great blurbs you've got. That's credibility in and of itself.
Yes. And does it matter if you have an ebook or a printed book? Is a printed book that you can hold in your hand and give away more powerful?
I would absolutely do both and an audiobook, because people listen to books, they read them on their devices, and they hold them. But I really believe there's nothing as powerful as a physical book. There's a magic to it. There's a sense of culture and society going back 1,000 years. And so you get that with a physical book, and you don't get that with a website or a social media feed. It's got to be a book. A physical book is best, yes.
Yeah, and physical books, actually giving a physical book or getting a physical book, it's like a gift, isn't it? Because it's a physical thing, right?
It's a thing. And I tell my clients, instead of spending a fortune on a marketing campaign, to start off, just put 100 copies of the book into 100 envelopes with 100 cover letters to 100 serious prospects that you've identified, and say, hey, I wrote this book and I really had you in mind because this book solves the problem that you face, which is whatever it is. And think about it. How often do you get a physical book in the mail? If you send it as an ebook, it's easily ignored or deleted. If you get a physical book, now it's on their desk. Even if they don't read it right away, it's sitting there, and eventually they're going to pick up the phone and call you. And not all 100, but enough out of that 100 will call you to make it worth your while. So you can do a marketing campaign with a physical book that you cannot do with any other form of marketing.
Yeah, and I think the thing about physical books as well is that you can browse through them. You can flip it open at different pages and things will catch your eye. And you can't really do that with any kind of an electronic book in the same way, can you?
No, that's right. And you can read it on a flight when you're in takeoff or landing and you're not allowed to use your laptop. They can pull your book out of their bag and start reading. And the first call they make when they land is to the spouse saying, the partner saying, I'm fine, the flight was easy. And the second call is to you, how soon can you get over here? That's a magic trick. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you've actually been involved in writing or publishing over 1,000 books across your 35-year career. That's a huge number of books. So tell us about some of the different, well, we say niches, you say niches, right? So tell us about some of the people that you've been involved with and some of the industries that you've impacted
Sure.
through those books.
Of course. And just to be clear, I haven't written 1,000 books. I've written hundreds, and I've planned 5, 6, 7, 800 books over the years, and have been involved in one way or another, consulting on or publishing or whatever, over 1,000. I've worked with folks who are in financial services, insurance, medicine, dentistry, real estate, hedge funds. I have right now a client who is the owner of a Major League Baseball team here in the United States. I've worked with top athletes, top broadcasters, top motivators. It's kind of dazzling to me, the people I get to work with. I like to say that my job is the greatest grad school in the world, because the people who are the best at what they do pay me to watch them think. And I find that very exciting. So,
Yeah. So let's get into this process of ghostwriting, because that's quite a unique skill, isn't it? I don't think there are that many ghostwriters who have the ability to work with those really high profile people. So I'd love to explore this in a bit more detail. Some people say that you've got to have your own voice. It's got to be you that actually writes the book, and it's better to get a coach than a ghostwriter. But I wonder what you thought about that, because I think the skill of a really fantastic ghostwriter, not that I've actually worked with one myself, but the power of somebody who really knows how to put a book together. I think it's a bit like any kind of amazing publicist, that they draw out the best in you. Would you agree with that, or are there other elements involved?
no, that's certainly true. And I have a course that people can take, and business people can take, and they can learn how to write their own books. The thing is that there is something special about working with somebody who's sort of been there and done that. I've done enough books in my career, I have enough gray hair, that I've either written the books that are most important in your vertical, in your field, or have read them. So this means that I know when you're saying something that no one else has said. And you might be making this point, that point, that, and then all of a sudden you say something, whoa, 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 what did you just say? Stop right there. And all of a sudden that becomes the focus of the chapter, or sometimes the entire book. And an inexperienced ghostwriter cannot do that. And AI cannot do. That's why you need a human being who's written a lot of books and who's read a lot of books to really make the difference. As far as doing it yourself, Jane, I know you love to write. Most people don't. And for most people, even for those who do, it's just simply not the highest and best use of their time to lock
Yeah.
it away and do a book. It's not pay time. It's going to
Yes.
distract from your career and your family. So that's another reason. It just saves so much. I need an hour a week to get 12 to 15 pages of book from a client. So that means I need about 12 hours of meeting time. And then if you add in another 8 hours of your time for the planning and then the reading of the chapters, all told, I need less than a full 24-hour day of my client's time stretched out over 4 months. If you can get a book done in 24 hours without me, you don't need me. but otherwise, give me a call. So.
Well, 24 hours for a really high quality book, 24 hours is nothing. If obviously there are 24 hours in a day, right? So I get it. If somebody has a very high value career, and if they have a lot of demands on their time, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And those individuals, I like to say, I only work with people who are too busy to talk to me. If
Yeah.
you have all the time in the world, you probably don't need a book. And if you have no time, you need one. But where are you going to find the time to make it happen? Look, I have a lawn out front of my house. It's my lawn. I don't mow my own lawn, but it's still my lawn. And if I ghostwrite your book, it's still your book. I'm here to facilitate the dissemination of your ideas in your words, in your syntax, in your mode of expression. And I've written for many clients in Great Britain. I've written for obviously many clients here in the United States. And it's all about a combination of sort of getting the ideas in the right order, marshaling the ideas properly, creating a great flow of information from the author to the client, to the reader, rather. but it's also about sort of mimicry, about being you, about listening for how you speak and for capturing your voice and getting it right on the page. I deliver the books chapter by chapter. So you're able to tell me immediately, I like this, I hate that, do more of this, do less of that. That sounds like me, that doesn't. So the goal is that by the time you're getting the third chapter in your inbox, you're comfortable with the process because you know that our conversations turn into great chapters. And you know that by now I'm in your head. I know how you like to sound on paper. I've got your voice down, and you're reading it and you have this sort of uncanny feeling of, oh my gosh, how did he do that? It sounds like me. And then people who read it would never suspect that you had any help. That's my goal, so that your spouse, your partner, your best friends, your colleagues would never even guess that you had help because it sounds like you.
Wow, that's really amazing. And there is such a thing. I'm a very avid reader. Yes, I do like to write. I do enjoy it. I'm very time poor. We were having this conversation beforehand, which is why I haven't personally got more books out, because I do love to write. But what I wanted to ask you is, how difficult is it to get that tone of voice to actually sound like that person? It must be quite hard.
It varies. Sometimes it just comes naturally, and sometimes, we go through several iterations before the client says, "Okay, that's it." I think also sometimes people are surprised by how they sound in print because they've never really seen their speech patterns on the written page. And when I do a book, my goal is not that it sounds like a speech to 10,000 people in a hall somewhere. It should feel like an intimate conversation between you and between someone who needs the information you have in a coffee shop. The two of you are just sitting there, and that person is just drinking in your wisdom and so excited to get that knowledge and just can't wait to find out how you can serve them. And they're waving their credit cards at you even before they've finished the conversation. So a book ideally should be a conversation in your voice that really lights up the other person, that appeals to people in your niche or niche, and solves a major problem for them that otherwise they wouldn't know how to solve. That's the book that you should write, and that's the book that's going to make the phone ring. And I like to call it CPR, which stands for cash in your pocket right now. So
we like that. Okay, so we were talking, we had some very interesting conversations prior to the actually going live with the podcast. So one of the things that we were talking about was the difference between a best-selling book and a best-earning book.
Yes.
So there is a big distinction, isn't there, Michael? So let's dive into that.
Jane, there really is. Best-selling status can be bought and paid for. You can drop the price of a book on Amazon for a day or two, and as long as the book crashes into one of the top 100 lists, sub-lists on Amazon, the book can be considered a national or international or Amazon bestseller. You can buy USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller status for about $65,000. I've got a couple of vendors who do that. I know a couple of people who say that they'll get a book on the New York Times list for $300,000, but they don't guarantee it. So I don't touch that. But the reality is that bestseller status does not mean necessarily that you're making any money on the book. It means the publisher might be, but you might not be. So what I like to say is that it's great to have the badge, as we discussed, as you put it, of having the bestseller status, of having that imprimatur on your book and on your CV. You're a best-selling author. At the same time, you want to find ways to write the book and then to use the book so that you become a best earning author. So the book is actually out there making you money instead of sort of moldering in the garage or existing without really being used. And so one of the things that I help my clients with is how do we market this book? Who is the niche audience? And that's another really important point. If you want to be a best earning author, you want to start off by asking not what do I put in the book, but whom am I addressing in the book? Who's the audience? What's the niche audience? Where are they now? Where do I want to take them? What body of knowledge that is in my head, if I put it on paper, would convince them to think differently, act differently, and above all, hire me? So that's the starting point for a really successful book. That's the starting point for a best earning book. And that's how you become a best earning author. because you're focused on the reader and the problems the reader has that you love to take away, and that you do so for a very high premium. That's a best earning author. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And who wouldn't want to be a best earning author? Because that's the reason why we write books, is because we want to grow our business. And as you said, I suppose in a way that badge that we talked about, the best-selling author, it's a good badge, but it's a bit like being a top voice on LinkedIn or something like that. It's helpful if people land on your profile and they say, oh, they're a best-selling author, top voice on LinkedIn. Anything like that is obviously helpful, but it's not the same as actually people buying your book. And I love this concept of renting space in people's brains. And of course, that is what you do when people buy your book and they actually read it. And a lot of people buy it and then they actually read it, because then, first of all, you're making the sales. And then secondly, you're renting the space in people's brains, right? So that is obviously when you start to build a relationship. And that goes way beyond that thing of the bestseller status, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. It's not enough to have a book. You've got to have a book that's out there working for you. My grandparents were diamond dealers, and they'd say that a stone was out there working. That meant that it wasn't in their safe in the office. It meant that a prospective buyer had it and was examining it on consignment and was going to decide whether to buy it or not. I've never really thought about this. I've never mentioned this here on any podcast before, but that's the idea, that you want your book out there working for you as if it were a diamond that someone else is considering buying, because your ideas are precious jewels. But how are people going to know about them if they're locked away in your website or if they're buried somewhere in a white paper? So the idea is to get that book out there working for you so that people are able to say, wow, this person really understands me. This person's been reading my mail. That's why I always say chapter 1 should never be about you, the author. It should be about the specific problem that the reader faces that you take away, whether you are a doctor, a financial professional, an insurance professional, or a consultant, or whatever you might be, entrepreneur, whatever it is. That's the focus of chapter 1. It's what does the reader need to have solved? Talk about that. Then they're going to be saying, who is this person? I've got to know who this person is. That's when they're going to read chapter 2, which is all about you. Chapter 3 outlines your process. Chapters 4 through 9 take them through the process. Chapter 10 is a respectful call to action. And your phone is ringing because you're a best earning author.
Yeah, I love that. How interesting. And tell me, does this work for fiction as well as, do you do any fiction, or
Yes.
or you do fiction as well?
Yeah, I've done tons of novels. I've done 3 of my own for Simon and Schuster and 2 for Putnam Berkeley. And my work has been either optioned or made by Disney and Steven Soderbergh and Paramount and ABC and HBO and on. So I've had a lot of fun with that. And I continue to do my own fiction. For my clients, I've ghostwritten many novels. And I've also ghosted a lot of business fables. Business fables are fantastic because they're really distinctive. Somebody else has the 7 steps to $1 million retirement or whatever it is. You have a story that's really compelling and unique and different. And I've done so many fables for financial advisors and for other business people, drawing on my background as a fiction writer, that it's something it's really fun for me. And then at the same time, it creates a lot of individuality and preeminence for the client, because all of a sudden they are the author of this business fable, and they're out there speaking about it, and they're out there giving away copies to people, or they're selling it, whatever they want to do with it. So a big fan of business fables, big fan of ghosting. I did a novel that became an ABC series. I cannot tell you the name of it, but it was really pretty thrilling to see my characters up there on TV, or one of my own novels became a Disney Sunday night ABC movie of the week. And it's really wild. So when you do a novel or a business fable or any kind of book, I always say magic happens. You cannot predict where the magic is going to come from, but if you put it out there, it will come.
Really? Well, that's really very inspiring. Yeah. So let's talk about book marketing now, because obviously when you've got the book, you've done a lot of the hard work, haven't you? So you've either authored it yourself, or perhaps you will have hired you and you will have finished the ghostwritten version of that book. Now, obviously, we need to get it into the hands of our readers, don't we? So how do we do that and become a best earning author?
Sure. The first step is to put the book up on your website and let people download it for free as a PDF in exchange for an email address. Now they've got your book. It's in the form of a PDF, but it's still a book. So it still sort of resonates as a book with people, and it lands as a book. And then you've got their email address, so you can drip market them to your heart's content, however you choose to do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to be extremely careful before you write a check for a large marketing campaign. There is a misalignment between the goals of most people who do book marketing and the authors. The marketers look at success in terms of how many impressions did your book make. Let's say that the Times of London has 500,000 readers. So if they get an article about you in the Times of London, they say, oh, that's 500,000 impressions. Now that might have led to 0 sales. But the thing is that from their perspective, they were successful. But from your perspective, the phone didn't ring. So you can put the Times logo on your website, which is really cool. And that's great. But that's all you got out of it. So you've got to be really careful before you spend anything on book marketing. And you want to make sure about a couple of things. First, ask the book marketer, what's your goal for the book? Just to make sure that you and the book marketer are aligned. And if the book marketer does not share your vision, move on. Don't try to convince them, oh yeah, I really can get deals of this size, or I really can get this kind of client. Because if they don't believe it, sales is a transference of feeling. They're not going to share your feeling of certainty with anyone else, and it'll be a waste of money. You also want to make sure that this publicist has succeeded for other people. So it's very simple. Just say to the publicist, may I have the names and contact information of other authors you've served successfully? And if they give the names and numbers, call those folks up, tell me how it went, and see for yourself. And if they won't give you those names and numbers, move on. There is just so much wasted money, frustration, heartache, disappointment, blown budgets when it comes to book marketing. And I'm not honestly a fan of most people who call themselves book marketers. I only know about 2 or 3 who are any good. And we have a country of 350 million people over here. And there are only 3 I would call on for book marketing. So, are there others who are great that I don't know about? Sure. Maybe if I really thought about it, I know 6. But, 6 out of the thousands and thousands who do this, I've been doing this long enough to see that you just have to be really careful with your book marketing budget. And those are a couple of ways to make sure that you're going to get a bang for the buck, as we say.
Yeah. So, okay, I take that point. So if you want to get people to buy the book, then how is the big question? Do you just get it into the hands of a really good publisher and let them do that work?
The major publishers, at least in this country, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here, major publishers don't do a thing to market your book. And it's all on you if you were to get a deal with a Simon & Schuster or a Random House. So the question really becomes, is my income stream making money from selling books, or is the purpose of the book to drive awareness and thought leadership and preeminence so that I can sell my services or my products?
Yep.
And it's awfully hard to sell physical copies of books to people, to strangers. It's really hard. If you're speaking and everybody wants a copy back at the room, they'll all buy copies. You printed them for $3 or $4 or £3, let's say, and then you're selling them for $25. That's a good day at the office. But trying to get total strangers to buy your book, you're competing with everything. You're competing with Disney. You're competing with top novelists. You're competing with doing nothing. You're competing with watching Netflix. So, you're really up against it if you're trying to get people to pay money for your book. But then you have to ask, how much could I possibly make if I sell a copy of my book? £5 to £7, $6, $8? Is it worth it? Then ask, how much money could I bring in? And I'm bringing this all back to money because we're business people.
Yeah.
How much money could I bring in with one new client? If I'm a financial advisor and I'm able to bring in $250,000 under management or $1 million under management, what are my fees going to be? If I'm a doctor and I'm able to bring in one new patient for cosmetic surgery, what's that going to be worth to me? And then ask yourself, how many copies of this book would I have to sell in order to equal one client? So I often tell my clients, don't get seduced by the idea of selling copies of your book, because I had a client years ago who she sold long-term care insurance, which is a very complex product. And it just takes a lot. It takes 2.5 days of client education. Then the client would say, listen, thanks. I'm not going to give you the business. I got to go to my brother-in-law. My wife will kill me. She got tired of that. So she did a book about that. And within a couple of months of her book coming out, she was on the $1 Million Roundtable, which is the highest level of success for insurance people here in the United States. And then she got caught up in the idea of, how many copies can I sell? And she lost her focus a little bit. I always say, don't go into the book business. Book business is a bad business. The book business is a declining business. Instead, use the book to build your business. It's a tool of influence, cleverly disguised as a book. At the same time, you have to provide value on every page. It cannot simply be a commercial for you, or the reader will be disgusted and it will cause more harm than good. But the thing is that if you create enormous value for the reader, you give away so much information, then they're going to come calling and saying, how can I get more? How can we work together?
Yeah, I totally get that. Okay, well, that is such fantastic advice and so clearly expressed, Michael. I really appreciate that. So I have quite a few people coming to me because I run an accelerator program for people who want to build their brands and their authority overall and put assets out into the market. So people come to me and they'll come and they'll say, I have a book. They won't come to me and say, can I help them write a book? Because obviously that's not what I do. But they'll say, I have a book and I want to use it to get paid speaking engagements. So I think that is something that a lot of people are very keen. A lot of the experts that I serve are very keen to do, because obviously it's very lucrative if you get on the paid speaker circuit, and it's enjoyable as well. So any tips for people who want to use a book to build their authority and get speaking gigs?
Yeah. The first question anyone who wants to speak will be asked is, where's your book? So it's non-negotiable. You must have a book if you're serious about speaking. And then the next question becomes, if someone says, I have a book, the question is, when was it written? Is it still current? I like to say that books are either BC or AD, which means before COVID or after Donald. And any book that is either pre-COVID and doesn't take into account the new realities of life, or doesn't take into account the political realities that have transformed in many ways my country and yours, a book that seems out of date is kind of useless. It's useless to the reader because it's saying that you haven't taken the time to update your own work. And if you haven't done that, if that's the honeymoon, then how's the marriage going to be? If I have a book for financial advisors and I was about to do a new edition of it, and then I looked at it and I read through and I realized this is totally out of date. There's not a word in here that's the same as when I first wrote it about 8 years ago. So the thing is that with COVID and with political changes and with economic changes, you've really got to sit down and ask yourself, is my book current? And I'd make that the starting point. And the good news is that just update it, and then you can put on the cover second edition, and everybody will be like, wow, she sold out the first edition. They're on to the second edition. This must be really good. So even that is a badge of honor, the fact that you've got a second edition. But that would be the starting point. And then there are people out there who can show you how to. I'm not the authority on that. I can get the book done. And once it's done, you can go out and find the speaking. But the thing is that without a book, good luck.
Yeah, that very important point. And I think the other thing about the speaking is, obviously, what do I know? I mean, I obviously help people overall, as I said, build their authority. But it would seem to me that if you have a signature talk that is also reflecting the theme of the book, and if you can get that filmed, then that strengthens both the performance of the book and also the overall perception of people that you are an expert on that particular topic. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And the easiest way to put together that talk, because people are saying, gee, what am I going to talk about? Is to use the table of contents of your book as the outline for your talk. You
Okay.
already put so much time into thinking through the transfer of knowledge from you to the reader. So now you can just use that again and make it a transfer of knowledge orally from you to the reader, from you to
Yeah.
the listener in this case. So you've already done the hard work of writing the outline. I'll tell you a dirty little secret. I once heard somebody advise people that if they want to make a speech and they're not quite sure how to frame the talk, buy an idiot's guide to whatever the topic is, and then just take the outline of the idiot's guide and make that the outline for their talk.
Oh.
So it's sort of a dirty little secret that people do. But if you've got your own book, you've already done the work of organizing the material. So just practice saying it out loud. While you're
Yeah.
driving the car, just give bits of the talk to yourself over and over. And once you've got one part locked down, then move to the next and move to the next. And but the thing is, you've already done the hard work of creating a flow of information from you to the reader. Why not use that as the foundation of your talk?
Yeah. And I think the thing that is as well so powerful about books is that once you've got that really great piece of solid thought leadership, you can repurpose the content and the ideas indefinitely. And for me, I think that's one of the really beautiful things about books, that you can take little chunks and put them into your social media posts. You can make little videos or shorts, or as you said, as we've been discussing, you can obviously turn it into a talk, a signature talk, or podcast episodes. There are so many different things that you can do, but it's really, we're talking about thought leadership, aren't we?
Yes, that's exactly right. And there are many ways to express thought leadership, and slicing and dicing your own book is one of those easy and brilliant ways to get that done. For me, the book is the foundation of everything that follows in terms of how you present yourself in the world. It gives you, when I'm working with my clients, it's not just about what are the chapters, what are the chapter titles. It's what's the unique, really cool language that allows you to own your intellectual property and get a service mark or the British equivalent of that, so that when people see a particular term, they know it's yours and you created it and you own it. And there's additional respect in that for you. You've got to own your intellectual property. And so when I create a book for a client, it's all about, okay, who's the audience? Where are they? Where are we taking them? And then what are the concepts that we're getting across? And then as we're going through it, what's the cool language that you're going to be able to use every time you do everything from elevator pitch through keynote? Because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all going to be in the book. And now we can pull it out, slice it and dice it, and use it accordingly.
Yeah. And that's so important. It really is. And that's something that I do a lot of work with my clients on, is actually some sticky words and phrases to package up their services. Because once you've got that unique way of describing what you do, or the problem that you solve, or the market that you serve, that it sounds different and original and more interesting than other people, that's when you capture their attention and their imagination, right?
That's exactly right. Again, it all comes down to getting out of the commodity trap.
Yeah.
And most people are very shy in the business world, and they want to hide behind the same platitudes as everyone else in their industry. But that becomes just hoping that people will choose them instead of someone else, instead of giving them reasons to choose them.
Yep.
And hope is not a strategy. It's great, but it's not going to make a business survive or the cash register ring. It's all about where's the language that's going to, may I tell a story real quick about a client of mine, a financial
Yeah.
service? So I was at a conference in Arizona about 10 years ago, and I was meeting an individual who wanted to go forward. So we're going over the agreement, and I said, okay, this is the confidentiality clause. This means that I don't disclose that I worked with you, and that nothing you disclose to me ever gets out of my office, and so on. He said, yeah, but do you know we have a $20 trillion deficit in this country? Now it's, I don't know what it is, 35, 40 trillion. But whatever I said, he would bring up the $20 trillion deficit.
Oh.
And I got home, I'm like, okay, guy's a little obsessed with it. Let's see what he says on his website. I get to his website, not a word. So I call him, I said, why is there nothing? I said, why is there nothing about the $20 trillion deficit on your website? Because it's all you talk about. He said, if I put it on my website, people will think I'm crazy. I said, well, in that case, those people were never your market. But the people who do think that the $20 trillion deficit is a big deal and is the biggest deal, the biggest thing we should be concerned with, they're your market. And I'll tell you something else. If you do a book that addresses that, they all know each other. They'll pass you around to their friends.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we did. A book that was 70% about the deficit and what it means to the economy, and only 30% about financial services, because that stuff is kind of fungible. Everybody says mostly the same stuff. So he's out there with his book, and he's crushing it because he flew his freak flag. He expressed his uniqueness instead of trying to hide behind the platitudes of everyone else in his industry just out of insecurity. So the people who do the best in the world are the most successful people are the ones who really have the courage to say, I'm going to be who I am. And Elon Musk today, or Steve Jobs, like them or hate them, but we know what they stand for, because they stand for being themselves. And the most successful people in any field are the ones who express their individuality and do not allow themselves to be shoved into the commodity trap by anyone or anything. So why not be like them?
Yeah, very important point, because if we are vanilla, we're brought up in many instances to be vanilla. In other words, to be polite, to be nice, to be charming, to say the right thing and not to upset anybody or ruffle feathers or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it actually doesn't serve us, I think, when we're out there trying to carve an identity for ourselves in the business world, and particularly an expert in a certain subject or niche. So I totally get that. And I think sometimes we have to risk being controversial and actually saying it like it is, right?
Yes, and I don't mean being offensive. Musk is offensive just for the sake of getting attention sometimes, and I don't advocate that. But the thing is that there are people who have the same problem that you solve. And if they don't know what you're about, if they don't know that all you care about is that $20 trillion deficit. I had this is not a client, he was a prospect. I said, what do you do? He said, I do retirement planning for firefighters in the last year of their work before they retire in the state of California. I said, how you doing? He said, I'm crushing it. I said, well, why don't you do police officers or teachers? He said, don't need to. I'm good with the firemen. They pass me on from firehouse to firehouse. They all know me up and down the state. I said, what do you need a book for? He scratched his chin and said, yeah, you're right. I don't. Have a nice day. So the thing is, he knew who he was. He knew what he was selling to, who he was selling to. And he didn't need to expand beyond the borders that made sense for him. Now, I'm all about intelligent growth, but sometimes we just try to eat everything in sight. And the reality is that when we demonstrate to a specific niche audience or niche, if people are here in the States, that we get them and we feel their pain and we understand the problem better than anyone they've ever encountered. And maybe we've surfaced a problem that they don't want to think about. I'm doing a book right now for a trust and estates attorney here in the United States. And it's about the common issues that cause people to see trust attorneys. And it might be the death of a parent or the death of a spouse. People start feeling their own mortality. So instead of doing sort of a traditional, the 7 things you need to know about estate planning, instead, the book is 5 stories. And the stories are condensed versions or combined versions of the typical issues that people present when they come to him. And the idea is that people read this and go, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that. I've got a cottage and 2 of my kids want to keep it and the third one wants to sell it. And what's going to happen when I die? Or I want to give money to a lot of charitable institutions, but I don't know if they can handle the money. Well, you're not the only person with that problem when you realize when you read the book. And then you realize the author of this book knows how to solve this specific problem, the specific issue you face, or one that's close enough. So you say, I'm going to give him a call. Well, that's a successful book because he's not hiding behind the 7 things that trust and estates attorneys do. He's telling you stories about people who have your problem. And I keep coming back to this because it's really essential. A book is a tool to show people that you can solve their problem. That's how it becomes a tool of influence. Otherwise, why would they even care about you or your book? They're busy. So
Well, I just love that. I really enjoyed this conversation, Michael. It's been amazing. Would you like to talk about your program for a moment?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. People are interested in ghostwriting. The website is my name, Michael Levin, Levin Writes, michaellevinwrites.com. And I have a course conveniently called the Best Earning Author Program. It's the Best Earning Author, bestearningauthor.com. And if you go there, you will find an online course that will show you everything you need to know about how to organize, plan, write, rewrite, publish, market, and best of all, monetize your book. It's a lot of the things that we've been talking about here, but in much greater detail. So you can go to bestearningauthor.com. And if you are interested in ghostwriting, I'm going to give you my cell number. This is my cell. It's 617-543-3747. I'll say it again. It's 617-543-3747. Operators are not standing by. As I said, it's this, and it will ring, and I will pick up, and we will talk and see if there's something that we should be doing together. So those are the ways people can get in touch with me.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I have enjoyed every single moment of our conversation today. So thank you so much for joining us on the Smart Connector podcast, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Likewise, Jane, it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.